Welcome everyone to another episode of Runners Roundtable, where this week I am joined by Coach Melissa Malani. I am so excited to talk to you today. And the two reasons I want to talk to you, or the two main reasons, I've been following you on Instagram for quite some time. And one of them is to kind of talk about how you progressed in your running, going from that 90-minute change in the marathon. But I also want to talk about, and I hope we spend a little more time talking about this, the power of female friendship, because it just seems just so evident on your page where it sounds really cheesy, and I hope it doesn't come across as cheesy, but I'm like, wow, Melissa loves her friends. Like
I do.
loves them and like uplifts them and supports them. And I'm going to make just a big assumption here in saying that those friendships have probably influenced who you are as a runner and your relationship with running. So I hope we get to kind of dive into that, because that's something I've been saying a lot, or throughout these discussions, I had that realization of how we're all just one meaningful connection away from falling in love with the sport of running. And from following you, I'm like, oh, she's got lots of meaningful connections. And how did you open yourself up to that? Because there is almost an element of vulnerability in showing up to new spaces and running with new people, and running with people who are faster than you, running with people who are slower than you. I had one of my friends, if she's listening to this, you'll know who you are, but she was like, I don't know how to run with people, like having the conversation with people. And I was like, oh yeah, you're right. Like that is actually kind of a learned skill of learning how to run with people. So before we get to that, can you introduce yourself and tell us your running story?
Yes. So thank you, first of all, for the invitation to be on the podcast. This is great. And runners, we love to talk about running. So any chance I get to do that is always a good opportunity. So yes, my name is Melissa Malani, and I am a 19-time marathoner, which I cannot believe that I say those words. I was not always a runner, and I came back to running after a few off and on relationships with it over the course of my life, about 11 years ago. And it just kind of started with Couch to 5K. And then I was like, okay, can I go further? And one of the things that I talk about regularly as a very vivid memory in my journey is the first time I ran 4 miles. Like that was huge to me. I had done 5Ks before, and that seemed like, okay, I can get to that point again. But to see that mile marker tick up to 4 was just mind blowing to me. And I just kind of kept going from there. And it's so perfect that we're going to talk about the relationships with running, because that's exactly the reason that I went the distance and started going, okay, maybe I can do a half, maybe I can do a full. It's because of the people, not because of my belief in myself. And so I got into my journey, did a half, thought I could maybe do a full, did a full, and just really fell in love with not only the distance, but the process. Who you become over the course of a marathon training cycle is addicting, and it's a constant challenge to be your best self. And how am I going to show up different and stronger and better in this training cycle? It's not necessarily about, am I going to get faster? For me, at least, like that's definitely been a goal. Yes, I want to get faster, but over time it's evolved. And then just within the last year and a half, my journey took another direction, if you will. And I decided I wanted to be a run coach because my coaches have helped me so much. So that's kind of a twisting road there about the journey, but that's where I'm at this point.
Well, I love that, because there's I find my story reflected so much in a lot of the stories of the coaches. And I like to point it out every time it comes up where it's like, hey, people, a lot of us are not born runners. A lot of
Mm-hmm.
us are people who came to running later in life. So if you're listening to this conversation and you're thinking, oh no, running's not for me, there's still time. And
Oh yeah.
I also feel that like running is one of those things that it finds you when you're ready for it.
Mm-hmm.
Like running is really, to this day, I will say running is really hard. What changes is your perception of that
Mm-hmm.
effort of hardness. So I love that you bring that up of like that 19 marathons, that astonishment of yourself that you were the one that did that. And that's for myself as well. The beginning of the year, I posted a photo on my Instagram account with my medals for the year. And I'm like, I even put something in the note. I'm like, please, this isn't like, I'm not trying to brag here. It's more just, I can't believe that that's me, that like
Yeah.
my body did all of that. And I so appreciate, especially as someone who's in the midst or in the beginning stages of London marathon training, what you said about the process of who you become over a marathon training cycle. Because if you've listened to any other episodes, people know this. I joke about it. My family is like, why are you doing another marathon? You say you don't like them. Every time I finish one, I'm like, I'm done. I'm done. And I've said it before where it's like, no, I feel like I could love the distance. There's just something I'm missing. There's a piece to my running puzzle that hasn't clicked into place for me to enjoy it. And I
Mm-hmm.
think it's something that happens on race day because I'm like, oh, the process of running, particularly when you're doing your long runs with people,
Mm-hmm.
it's a lot
Yes.
of fun. I'm like, wait, are you
Yes.
telling me that on Saturday mornings I get to have like 3 hours with people that I love to talk about and we're going to talk about everything? It's not
Yep.
really going to make sense. But on race day, and that was kind of, even now, as I said that out loud, I'm like, oh yeah, that was something that happened when I ran the 2021 Chicago Marathon, where I was running and, very soon into the race, I was like, okay, today's not my day. And then I spent a good chunk of the race scoping people out, trying to figure out like
Mm-hmm.
who I could make friends with on the
Yep.
course. And I was
Yep.
like, oh, that's what I'm missing here. It's the friend piece to help me get through, because even though you're surrounded by a lot of runners, it's not the same as having that discussion. And I'm sure you've experienced it as well, where it's like, oh, even when I'm running with people, the thoughts in my head are still ticking. Oh, this is
Yes.
hard. I don't know if I can keep going. I don't know, whatever. But then it's like, okay, let's interrupt those thoughts, focus on the conversation, let my friends pull me forward, and eventually
Yes.
I'll get there. I also love it's like and I think this is part of these conversations as well, where the relationship between coach and athlete, it's not just a training plan. So it's so
Right.
beautiful to see how you were coached, and coaching and I feel like, at least from the sound of what you said, definitely mentorship relationships there as well, that
Mm-hmm.
then gave you the confidence or gave you the realization that this was something you could do as well and pass on. So it's just such a full circle moment of, oh, I benefited so much. Now let me pass that on to people as well. What would you
Yes.
say have been your biggest lessons since making that transition into run coaching? What, like, has your relationship to running changed? Has your understanding of running changed since then?
Absolutely, to both. It's funny because even as someone who's run many marathons and has been a run coach for not very long, but a decent amount of time, and has been coached for going on 8 years now, I still remember reaching out to my first coach with that imposter syndrome of, who do you think you are that you need a run coach? This is your hobby. You're not fast. You're not, at the time, a Boston qualifier. You're not even close. Like, what do you think you're doing? And I have athletes or potential athletes that will reach out and say pretty much the similar types of things. Like, I'm slow. I don't know if I can do this. I haven't run a marathon, but there's something in them that is saying, there's that little voice that's saying, we might be able to do more. You can do more. There's something here. And they know they can't do it alone. Like none of us do any of these things alone. And that is one of the things that I like to talk about with my athletes is you don't have to be a certain pace or a certain distance or any of that to have a coach. Some people want it to try new things, and some people want it for accountability, and some people want it for that relationship because they don't have a running club that they're with. And so some of my athletes I talk to several times a day, almost every day, about their run, dissecting it, even about like the weather and their bathroom stops and all kinds of stuff, because they're running solo. So I've learned by being coached as well how to approach coaching. And I think that taking the really good experiences as well as the not so good is what makes people a good coach, because you can then say, all right, I remember how this felt, and it was either great or not so great. And I want to make sure that my athletes have a great experience. I also think that my role as a coach, like when we go through the certifications and stuff, a lot of it is on the physical aspect, as it should be. But a lot of what I do, and you may do the same, is talking to my athletes about the mental approach and that self-talk and that mindset, because it is so easy to talk yourself out of a workout, out of a longer cool down. I can't do this. I'm tired. It's cold, blah, blah. I mean, we can come up with anything in the book. But at the end of the day, if we have a coach that we can come to and say, this was my struggle and here's where I'm at, that coach can then help us not only give us a great workout, but okay, when we get to this workout the day before, here are the things that I want you to think about and repeat. And then on the day of, this is what I want you to repeat. And I want you to remember, like, I'm going to be looking. Did you cut things short? Did you quit? Did you swap to easy? Whatever. And so I feel like that has been a shift in my coaching approach as well, as it's not just about writing the plans and the workouts and what they're going to do. It's making it mesh with the athlete's life and what they can do, but a lot of it on that mindset and that belief and that self-talk to make sure that we are successfully not just completing workouts, but completing them in a way that's going to set us up for the best possible success on race day.
I love that. And I just, as I was thinking, it's funny because people don't realize how much energy it takes to talk the mind down or to interrupt that negative self-talk. Even for myself. And like you said, we are our best experiments. Like I really do think that, and this is just my approach to teaching, to coaching, to everything, is that if it comes from an embodied place of like, yeah, I know I may not know that exact experience, but I know the feelings that go along with it, then it's a little bit easier to talk to people about it or to talk through it. And even for myself, having to go from I can't to just try, that was really, really hard. But in doing that, so much opened up for me, because now I can't create pressure. Like there is so much pressure that comes with that I can't. There's disappointment that goes with that. You feel disappointed that you can't do what your coach says that they think you can do. There's so much. So I love that you point that out, because all that mental stuff, that is a valuable energy that gets taken away from the physical. If you're so busy, and I mean, I'm sure we've all experienced it where we see a hard workout and we're like, we can't, no, this is really hard. And then that morning you can't eat like normal. You're using the bathroom more, right? Where it's like you're, instead of having that, okay, I'm just going to try, we're just going to see what works, you know, what happens, what doesn't happen. That's energy. That is energy that definitely takes away from the body. One of the questions that I love to ask is, how do you handle those discussions with your athletes? Because those are difficult discussions, right? So if you give someone a workout, let's pretend, you know, let's just imagine it's a speed workout, and you see that instead of doing the workout, they did it, you know, they took it easy, right? So that's one discussion. What if you see that it's like, oh, it's already, you know, it's been 2 workouts that this person has done that? What is that discussion? Because I think that's part of this is also so that people build awareness that these are relationships. You're a coach. Yes, you'll create a plan, but the plan, I like to call it, it's a living, breathing thing.
Yes.
So your plan, it's not set in cement. It's totally changeable. Obviously, the athlete, not obviously, but hopefully it's obvious at this point, right? The athlete has to communicate with you what's working, what's not working, or how they're feeling or whatnot. But when you see that the athlete is avoiding that discussion or making changes, or, you know, I know you know what I'm saying because you're smiling. How does that discussion work, or how do you approach that? Because that's, you know, that's technically conflict in the coach athlete relationship.
So I take it individually because every athlete is different, and some people are going to bring it to me before I may have even seen the workout. You know, I've got some athletes that will text me and say, before you even look at my VDOT, here's what I did and here's why. And then we might go back and forth on text. Some people like to have a phone call, and I always like to make it very, very clear. I'm not upset. You're not disappointing me, but I want to help you so that you're not disappointed on race day. Because if you come to me with a goal, I'm taking that very seriously. That is my goal now. I'm just as invested in this, even though I'm not running those miles with you. If, you know, you have a goal of a certain time or to BQ or to complete a distance, I feel like I'm like the little, you know, birdie on your shoulder every time, like, yes, let's do this. Here we go. So it's, you know, sometimes it might be just a one-off that people say, work is really crazy, or stuff at home is crazy, and I just didn't have it in me. And in those situations, I might say, I totally get that. And stress is stress. And if you didn't have it, I'm glad you at least went out for a run, and I hope that helps. Do you think we can maybe modify things this week to give it another go, depending on where it is in the week and, you know, the training and all of that? Because if we missed it on a Monday, doesn't mean that we couldn't try again on Wednesday. You know, let's see. If it's something where they're just kind of saying, I just didn't want to, I just didn't have it in me, then that we have a conversation about, okay, well, tell me why. Were you intimidated by the paces? Because like you said, we see some of these workouts sometimes 2 weeks in advance, and we allow them to start getting in our head about, oh my gosh, how am I going to run that fast? She wants me to run that fast for a 400 or an 800 or whatever. Like, I can't do that. And you start psyching yourself up about it. So it's, okay, did you bail on it because of that? Did you bail on it because you were afraid to quote unquote fail and not hit paces? So what was the point in doing it? Did you bail on it because now you're just not feeling well? Like what is going on? Because I can relate to this completely too. It is hard to have a big workout and go out there and try your hardest and miss paces. It is hard. But it's life. It's what happens. It happens to all of us. I love that the elites talk about this. And they say, you know, if you're nailing every workout, you're not doing your training right. Like that's normal. And it's those days where you go, dang it, I've got, 8x800. That's just one of my personal least favorite types of workouts. So I'm
Oh,
going to throw
anything
that out there.
kilometers. I'm with you. Kilometers, I'm like, I want to throw up anytime I see them on the
Yeah.
training bed. I'm like, no.
It's a longer distance, it's a harder pace, and there's so many of them. And if you get to, rep 2 or 3 and you're like, I am off and this feels terrible, it is so hard to keep going and finish that workout. And to me, as a coach, I would rather have an athlete do that and say, I was off by 5 or 10 seconds every single rep, but I gave it my all and I didn't quit, because there's so many other factors that come into play as to why those reps might have been quote unquote off. But you tried and you had that effort. And for that day, for your body, that effort was good enough. That's what we needed. And next week, you might take that same workout and smash it to pieces because you're in a different physical space, mental space. Life is different a week later. So those are the kinds of conversations that I have. And then sometimes it's when we get like, it's like peeling an onion, when we get layers and layers and layers, and they're like, no, I was prepared, I was mentally ready, I wasn't scared of the paces, blah, blah, blah. We find out maybe they didn't fuel properly. Okay, well, maybe we need to, and this is something I find a lot with my early morning runners, and I am one as well, that it's like, but I don't have time to get up early enough to eat. Well, we can eat something and go right out the door, and we can fuel on the run. So it's, oh, but I'm afraid and there's no bathrooms and blah, 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 all these things. Like, well, let's have a conversation about it rather than bailing on these workouts. There's something that we can do, because on race day, you're going to have to eat before, especially if it's a distance race. You're going to have to eat a lot before. You're going to have to eat a lot during. So we got to figure this out. Training is the time to try all of this. You don't want to show up on race day going, well, I don't know what the heck I'm going to do, but here goes nothing.
It's so true. And I just want to highlight something you said. And it's I wrote it down because I was like, oh my God, this is so good. Right. And I want to highlight this because people need to hear this. You said something to the effect of, I'm not disappointed in you. I don't want you to be disappointed in yourself on race day. And that is just, for me, such a beautiful sentiment that really does encompass so much of run coaching and that run coach athlete relationship, where it's like, you as a coach, you're not trying. Yes, you're trying to challenge the runner, right? Like you are trying to challenge them, help them get closer to their goal, deal with the mental things that come up when they feel challenged, because like, we talked about a little bit earlier, where it's not just the physical challenges that you have to train yourself to deal with when you're running distance, any distance. It's also the mental things that come up. I always say that running is this space where I'm either my biggest cheerleader or my biggest critic. And I spend a lot of energy trying to be my biggest cheerleader. So I love that you say that, because it really does. It empowers your athlete to be like, okay, it's not about you. I don't have to feel guilty or like I owe you the explanation or like I disappointed you, because I think some athletes will carry that guilt. They'll they'll confuse being accountable to their coach with feeling like they're going to disappoint their coach. And it's like, no, it's actually two different things. You as the coach, you're giving them the workouts that are tailored to them, that you believe they can do. It's not that they're going to disappoint you, but it might prompt a discussion. So I just wanted to highlight those words, because what you're doing as a coach is you're trying to give them the tools to show up as powerfully, as strongly, as injury-free as possible on race days, so that they can have the best experience. I also wanted to go back to something else that you said. And I think about this often, and I try to tell people, where it's like, there is no failure in running, right? Like the only
Right.
failure in running is if you just stop. Like if we're labeling anything a failure, what there is in running are multiple opportunities to learn and to experiment and figure out what can be done differently or what you should have done to prepare better. And even in your example of, oh, you're off 5 to 10 seconds each rep, I'm like, well, that's not a failure, because if you're consistent across each rep, then okay, that's what you had in you today. It's not a failure if you didn't meet the exact things. And that's part of why I think coaches are so important for people, because you, the coach, have that global view that can offer the perspective. Because if I look at my workouts and I honestly, it would be more, I would want to know more if I see that, one rep, and I'm just going to give numbers here, right? Like one rep is 9 minutes. Another rep is 8 minutes. Another rep is 9:15. Another rep is 7:45. Then I'd be like, okay, wait, what was going on there? But it's telling me everything's around like 8:20 to 8:45 when you said it should be an 8:15, right? Like, then it's like, okay, tell me, well, like, what was going on? Were you fueling? And even for myself, and similarly, I'm a morning runner, and I try to eat my graham crackers, but I am getting myself into the habit of any run that I do, if it's over 4 miles, this is just for me. If it's over 4 miles, I'm taking fuel with me regardless, because I'm like, wait, I already know that I'm going into this run with just graham crackers. Like, and graham crackers are wonderful. They're great. They sit well with my stomach, but I'm like, no, I'm going into it. I'm trying to make up. Like, I'm eating just enough to get me through those first few miles. I need something to continue on the run. And that's what works for me. But it is such an interesting thing to think about, even as a coach, that your morning runner might be coached differently than your evening runner or your midday runner, because there are all these other life factors that come into play. But I just so love what you said about, I'm not disappointed in you. Like, I just don't want you to be disappointed on race day. Such a powerful statement. If someone is interested in working with you, how does that process usually go? Are they reaching out to you via Instagram? Are they filling out a form? Are they sending you an email? Do you have a consult? How do you determine if someone is a good fit for you as a coach, and whether you're a good fit for them as a coach?
I love that you say whether you're a good fit for them, because that's always how I approach it. Is I feel like the athlete is really the one kind of interviewing to see, is this person going to be is this what I'm looking for? So the initial connection usually comes from Instagram or some type of word of mouth, maybe somebody that I've coached and now they're, kind of just sharing. And I do have an intake form online that's linked in my Instagram bio. And if someone comes through another route, I'll send them the form just so that I can get a little bit more information to get the conversation started. And then I always do a phone call, and I'm pretty solid on that phone call, because again, I want the athlete to know, is this the energy I'm looking for, and give them a chance to really ask questions. Because when you're having that live conversation, a lot of times people will have questions that pop in their head that they may not have thought of versus just emailing or texting. So I like to really take some time and go through. It's usually 20, maybe 30 minutes, depending on the person. Answer their questions, go over the details, tell them why I structure things the way I structure it. Because some people may have been coached in another way previously. And I like to find out details about their life, details about, okay, tell me about how many days a week you can commit. What about cross training? What about recovery? And then I take all those notes and basically make sure that I've got a complete picture before we get started. But I just really feel that because it is a relationship. You can have the best, most amazing coach on paper, but if you don't have that connection with that person, it's not going to work as good as it could with somebody that you do have a connection with. And I think that once you find, and this is the other aspect of it, once you find that person that you have a connection with and you start working with them, it's any relationship. It takes a while to kind of get your grounding. So I say that in our call is, listen, if people are looking to train for a single marathon cycle, I'm going to help you if that's what you really want. But what I'm hoping as a coach to be able to do is not just help you through this next goal race or cycle, but to build a relationship with you so that we can complete that and then continue this process, because running is a lifelong sport. It's the gift that we will have forever. And the longer that you work with someone, the more that relationship blooms and blossoms. Not only does the coaching become better, in my opinion, because I've really learned about this person, but just that communication, that honesty, those barriers and masks kind of fall off, where they might say, just things that we may not admit to other people. And that vulnerability and that ability to just say, I'm scared about this workout, or I'm scared about this big goal, that comes through time. There's not too many people that are going to open up and be that raw and real straight out of the gate. So that's another thing of mine that I just really, through coaching, I want to have people that are willing to continue the relationship if that's what works for them, and they can continue running, because it takes time to get that traction and to get to know each other.
That's where I've been reflecting quite a bit on where people who just work with a coach for a training cycle, I mean, people get their goals and they meet it, but I'm like, there's so much missed from discovering who, from the athlete perspective, discovering who you are as an athlete when you're coached through recovery, when you're coached through an off season, when you're coached through base building, when you're coached through different distances. There's just so much information that you learn about yourself. You learn, and I agree with you in your relationship. I've been with my coach, I think we're going on 5 years now. And the longer we've been together, the more confident I've been to be like, hey, I want to try this. Like, not even are you okay with trying this? Where I feel like in the beginning, there was that trepidation. And it's been so wonderful, because truly, the longer you work with a coach, the more you feel the truth of their investment in you. And I don't mean investment financially. I mean like that emotional investment in you as an athlete, where, and I've said this too, where it's, again, going back to like marathoning. I'm like, I don't like marathons, but I remember sending my coach a text with like, I'm thinking about signing up for the London Marathon. And she responded with, I'm so excited, and like emojis. And I was like, oh, she's excited. I should be excited too.
I should be excited. Yes.
Absolutely. And I'm like, oh, if I would have done that 4 years ago, like I would have said, oh, she's excited, she's crazy, right? Like, no, I'm not buying it. But because she said she was excited, again, I was like, oh, okay. If she's excited, she knows something I don't know. Like there's something here. And I think it goes back to that, of that vulnerability, and of you have all these interactions where you do have that feedback, where you can tell like, okay, the coach is genuinely excited for me, or they have this, like you buy into the relationship more.
Yes, 100%.
If you had to describe your coaching style, how would you describe it?
That's a really good question. And people have asked me that before. And the word that I can come up with that describes it to me is personal. And I know that's kind of a generic word, but the reason that I come back to this constantly is it's personal because of that relationship. I'm not looking to write you a plan and send it and okay, here we go. Anybody can do that. And I even say that on our initial consult calls is you're going to get things as we go, as your fitness changes. I'm not going to give you a 16-week plan straight out of the gate. Here we go, and check in on you. And like, this is a ongoing personal relationship. So not only is it customized and personalized to them, but that personal connection. How are you? How did these efforts feel? How is work going? I'll get texts that say, my kids are sick and I want to shuffle things around, and I check back in with them later in the week. Not necessarily about the runs, but how are your kids doing? How is everything? Like, when people have job interviews, how did it go? Like, it's a personal connection. And yes, the running brought us together, but all of those other things around our life can influence our training. And if I know what's happening in your life, not to be nosy, but to just be a helpful part of it, that's what I want to do, so that the coaching is going to be as best and most beneficial as possible. So like again, I always think, like, you got to come up with a better word than personal, but that's what I come down to, because it's just that connection and, making sure, because it's more than just individualized or customized. It's truly personal to that person and their life and their running and all of the things that's happening for them.
Well, I feel like it's even bigger than that, right? Because it's not just personal, it's that you're interested in the person,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yep.
Where it's like, yeah. And I think about this too. And I've said this before as well, where oftentimes this run coaching relationship, you may be that person's only support for their running.
Yes.
You may be the only person that's excited about them to be
Yep.
running, or you
Yep.
may be the only person in their life that understands how important a goal is, that understands why these things matter. You're also sometimes, I've had coaches tell me this, and sometimes you are the one person that knows something that no one else knows. And the example I always give, it's particular to female runners, if they find out they're pregnant.
Yep.
You're going to know. I mean, you might be like person number 2 to find out that they're pregnant, because like you said, understanding the person and having that personal relationship with them means that you understand the context of their lives, so that you can create a training plan that, and here's the other part too, where it's like, I hope people really understand this, where it's like, your creation of a training plan is supposed to fit into their life, not conflict with their life.
Yes, absolutely. And I get this, and you probably do too, where people will say, we booked a family trip, but how am I going to train? And I get that. I 100% get it. But at the same point, I always say, we will make your training fit your life, not always your life fit your training, because that life will pass you by, and those kids are going to grow, and those spouses are going to change, and the vacation won't always be there. But the training, we can finagle that and massage that for a week or two or whatever. We can figure it out. And a week of cross training, if that's what it ends up being, is not going to make or break you. Like, that's fine. Take the trip, make it so that you're enjoying your life and your family. But on the flip side, like you were saying, being the only person that, is encouraging them or is invested in this, when someone decides they're going to make a change, and all of a sudden, like, their family might be going, what do you mean you're not staying up late and eating and drinking like garbage and all this kind of stuff, and you're trying to better yourself? Like, I've had athletes say, you're the only person that's excited that I didn't, go out and party up on New Year's Eve like I normally do and not know what I'm doing for the next 24 hours. Like, that's an important thing, to be able to celebrate somebody making a change. That takes a lot of guts for somebody to change. And sometimes that means you lose friends because you're not doing those lifestyle things anymore. And that can be a loss, for that athlete. And so I think that it's really important to say, listen, we're going to make your training fit your life, not the other way around. But at the same point, if you're looking to make a shift like that, like I don't want to feel like garbage anymore, and I want to do these other things, then I'm going to help you make that happen if that's the goal. So, but it's such a privilege to be a part of these journeys with athletes that it's one of the best parts of the job, if you ask me, that, we're helping people do things and better themselves and change their lives in a good way. But also trying to help people like me, total type A, not stay so type A and stay so like strict and rigid that they skip things. It's nice to be a part of that process for them in their life.
Yeah. And in both cases, whether it's the making a change or being type A, it's you're helping people become who they want to be. And
Absolutely.
running is one of those things that helps, not necessarily helps, but just adds color to that picture of who they envision themselves to be.
Yes.
If you had to, in one sentence, describe your coaching philosophy, what would that sentence be?
Oh my goodness. In one sentence. So
I know.
not only do runners like to talk, but I'm a speech language pathologist. So I really like to talk. So being concise with language is not always my strong suit. I guess I would have to say the best, quote unquote, the best workouts and runs are the ones that you're going to do. So I approach coaching again with that personal perspective of, okay, if you don't have time for this type of a run, then let's find one that you do. If you absolutely hate certain speed workouts and you are going to bail on them every time, then we're going to find something that does. Because some people might live and die by 800s, but if you're not going to do them, then they're not going to help. So the best training workouts, runs are the ones that you're going to do. And so I like to make sure that we do things that the runners are going to do.
Yeah, which, and if you're listening to this, hey, that requires you, the runner, the athlete, to communicate that. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of bailing, I always think of, I have an aunt and she's one of my muses. I call the most influential women in my life. They're my muses. And she told me something over a decade ago of, you got to give everything a try at least once. Well, she said at least twice, once to see if you like it and twice to confirm whether you do or not.
Yeah.
And I try to take that into everything. And it's the same thing with running, where it's like, okay, that workout that's scary, give it a try. What's the worst that can happen? It sucks. Like, honestly, the worst that a workout can happen is that it sucks and you don't meet the paces you expected yourself to meet, or you didn't, whatever the case is, right? Because at that point, you're going into the run with an expectation instead of just letting the run be. So it's, you can go into it, give it a try. You're not going to know what a run has to give you unless you try it out. But I also like, again, another highlight this, that for a run coach, that's part of the fun of being a run coach is, okay, so if you don't like 800s, what's the workout that you do like? And how can I make it into something or reframe it into something that you don't realize? Like, I love when my coach gave me, she started giving me more time-based ones. So it would be like 4 sets of 4 minutes hard and 2 minutes recovery. And after a while, I was like that workout, I'm like, this is so great. I love it. And then I was like, did she just give me 800s like afterwards? And I was like, oh, so that's it. Like, it's how can you get the benefit without maybe, and again, it's like mental. It's that mental figuring out where can you get the benefit without necessarily doing the thing you don't like, but still doing the thing that's going to give you what you need to feel strong on race day. So like, this is what a coach does. A coach is going to figure that out, but you have to communicate that. And you have to say like, hey, this is working. This isn't working. This is where I feel strong. This is where I feel challenged. Or even like, I love when people tell me, oh, this is a run that makes me feel like not a good runner. And it's like, okay, cool. Let's kind of like that out and understand, what does that mean? Like, what is a good runner? What's a bad runner? So I
Right.
think
Exactly.
so much to learn. I'm curious, how did you go? What was the progression? And I don't say progression in a way that it's linear, but I guess the question is more, what's the story with your marathon times?
Yeah, definitely not linear. So I decided to try a marathon because I found a training club here in town. And honestly, it was a bit of a chip on my shoulder because some other people at my kids' school were like, oh, yeah, I did this marathon and that marathon. And I was kind of like, well, if you can do a marathon, I can do a marathon. Like, you're older than me. Like, I should be able to do that. So I did. I kind of used it as a challenge. Like, these people are like significantly older than me. If they're doing marathons, I should be able to do it. And I thank them for that, because if they hadn't shared their experience, who knows? But anyways, did the first marathon in 5:12, and I was at that time doing run walk intervals, 4-minute run, 1-minute walk. I didn't know anything about fueling. Like, I was just ignorance on fire out there on that course. But it lit a spark in me. Like, I felt so terrible the last 10K of the marathon, which, I mean, that's normal, right? But I felt so terrible that it was like, I want to do that again, and I want to do it better. I don't want to feel that way. I want to be, because the first marathon I did, it was basically like 6.5 miles north, turn around 6.5 miles south. Then we kept continuing another 6 and come back. So you saw those fast people twice. And it was like, man, I don't think I'll ever be like them, but maybe I can try. So basically, I just kept showing up. And a few years into my journey, I hired my first run coach. And he's the one that really pushed me and made me drop. At that point, I had taken an hour off my time. And he took another 30 minutes. And then it's taken me the last few years to take another 20 off of it. So it was a lot of work and a lot of time spent doing exactly what I tell my athletes to do. Just try, just go out there and try. Yes, it's scary. You see these runs with paces that are like, who do you think you are? Like, at least that's what runs through my head. And you just have to go try. And lo and behold, people say it's kind of cliche, but one day this pace will be your warm-up pace. And it's true. It is true. And it's all because you just keep going and showing up and doing your best. So that was kind of my evolution. And the people that were involved are truly the reason why I was able to make such big gains. And I mean, I'd still like to get faster. I'd like to do more. And I have no doubt that it will be the people involved again that are going to help me get there.
What would you say, what was the timeline between your first, I guess, the timeline, when was your first marathon and when was your last marathon?
So my first marathon was December of 2013. And my most recent marathon was last Boston. And I kind of started out doing several, like I would do 3 or 4 a year, because I wasn't doing speed work. I was only running maybe 3 days a week. I was just kind of like, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm just out here doing it. And I would do multiple marathons in a year. And then when I started to work with a coach and start putting in more efforts and have more purpose behind my running, that's when it was a shift in saying, okay, you might only want to do 1 or 2 a year because you're working so hard. You're not having time to recover and rebound to take on the next training cycle with the same tenacity as you want to. So you're just kind of spinning your wheels in this gray zone doing these 3 and 4 marathons a year. So I've backed off in the number that I do. And I did do a few in a row in COVID because it was such a stress relief to be able to run that it was like,
Yep.
okay. And, it was kind of like, wait, all the marathons went away and then they started coming back. So it was like, oh, if I can do this, I'm going to do it. Like,
Absolutely. Absolutely. And thank you for answering that question about the timeline, because that's one thing that I feel like we often miss in the stories of people. Like if you just say, oh, I took 90 minutes, people make a lot of assumptions. But when you think
mhm,
about it, of you've had at this point a decade of
mhm,
running marathons, and I'm sure it's been ups, downs, lots of stuff in the middle, lots of like heartbreak, lots of joyful
lots.
moments, and
Yes.
where you see that it is a lot. Like and I was talking about this to another coach, and I even reflected on it with myself, where it's, in the beginning, you see massive amounts of improvement once you start adding in the things like nutrition. Once you start, and I'm sure it's, going from training like whatever to training, I love how you said it, like with effort and with purpose, your body and everything is going to respond so differently. So
Mhm,
thank you for answering that question on the timeline, because again, it's more, I want people to understand that sometimes there is a long time to see these changes, which again, going back to what we said of the benefit of having a run coach seeing you through seasons, is that when you don't see the leaps, your run coach can help you see the steps that you're taking.
absolutely.
You mentioned people were important. So I cannot end this conversation. This will be our second to last question. I cannot get through this conversation without talking about the people, particularly the women in your life, and
Mhm.
how they have impacted you as a runner and in your relationship to running. So if you can share a little bit about that, I would love to
Yeah.
hear about it.
So when I first started running and joined the local run group, we were organized by paces basically. And so we had little pace groups that would meet up on the weekend. And most of us just naturally kind of gravitated to those same groups for our weekday runs. And those women, first of all, I was so scared to show up. Like I knew no one and I showed up like, hi, here I am. I'm new and I don't know anybody and I don't know what I'm doing and I'm new to running and all of that. And there were many races and events that I had gone to by myself. And those women, especially, were so welcoming and so just like, come on, let's go. I'm so and so, I'm so and so. This is how we do it. These are our routes. And again, like there's something about building those relationships when you are suffering through a really hot long run, a 20 miler or something like that, and you're waking up early and you're voluntarily doing all of these things and you're having conversations about them and you just get to know people on a much different level. And some of my still closest friends are people runners in those first groups, women that I don't run with anymore because we're doing different things pace wise or race wise. And yet we can have dinner or they'll join for yoga or something like that. And we pick up right where we left off. Like it is a relationship like none other. The other thing is these are people that are the same kind of quote unquote crazy as you. So
Yeah.
they get you. And when you say, hey, who wants to, meet up at 4:30 or 5 a.m. and run hills or do whatever, they're like, yeah, I'll be there and I'll bring an extra light and some fuel and drop water if you need to. Like they are just selfless and giving, and they are unlike any other friends that I've had in other areas of my life. And I think that especially as a woman, that's rare. Those are sacred and very hard to come by friendships that are true and trustworthy, that it's a sisterhood. It truly, truly is. And I say that because most of the people I run with are women. Nothing against the men in my running groups at all, because I think the world of them as well. But I think it's just a little bit of a different relationship. And it's something that I've encouraged my daughter, who's in high school, to say, like, get into the sports. I was not in sports in high school, and I wish I was, because there's something different about forging those friendships on your basketball court or your lacrosse you're doing, that you just don't find in other parts of life. So and one thing I thought of earlier when we were talking about like the self-talk and the people on the course and all of that, my last marathon in Boston, I ran with two girlfriends, and we did the whole thing start to finish. And it was literally because of those two being by my side that I didn't stop. I didn't take it easy. I didn't quit. I didn't need to run a certain time on that marathon. It was just kind of like, I'm here doing it because it's Boston, and I will never not do Boston.
Right.
But it was because of them that I thought, if I lose them, if I don't hear their names along with mine, if I can't look over at them and say, I'm hurting, and have them say, me too, but we're not stopping, like that literally carried me to the finish line. And I will never forget those experiences and relationships. And I mean, I'm rambling. I could go on and on and on forever, but it is the people. And you'll hear that from the running clubs, where they'll say, it's the people that get me up and get me to do this. And people that say, I'm never running another marathon again. But then a friend says, I'm thinking about, it's the people that bring you back.
Oh yeah, we had on Saturdays here, and I would laugh because it's like, now it's just customary. We wake up at 5, like we're starting our runs at 5 a.m. It doesn't matter. I've had 8-mile runs where I'm like, no, it's okay. Like, I'll still meet you at 5 a.m. Like, I'm good with 5 a.m. It's fine. Like, and there is just so much intimacy that is created in these relationships when you are running in the dark, when you're sweating, when you're, it's like, as someone who's a mom, and you're a mom too, where it's like, oh, here's this time where you can talk to other people who, if they're moms as well, there's an understanding that you just don't get in other areas. It is. I totally hear you on all of that, because I'm kind of the same way, where I am trying to work on deepening those sisterhood relationships. And it's nothing against the men, y'all, nothing against the men, but there is something so empowering by seeing yourself reflected and loved through another woman's eyes, that you're like, oh yeah, I can totally, like, I can totally show up and be my best self because this woman believes that I can. And I think the power in that is that it really starts to deconstruct a lot of what we're told about women being catty and
competitive.
All of that. So when you have those relationships, people, if you're listening, if you have them, find them, like, hold on tight to them, and wake up at 4:30 in the morning if it means strengthening those relationships, because it's going to be those relationships. And I find it for myself too. It's those relationships that remind me that I exist beyond motherhood, beyond being a wife, beyond the work, beyond these systems that, don't necessarily see me as much because I'm a woman, right? Like, all this stuff. So there is a depth to those relationships that we don't always get to see. And again, there's something so special about those early morning runs where they're really, at least in my case, where I'm like, there's just no filter. Like, the filter is care. I don't feel like I have to put my mask on to get through the day. I
Yep.
can just, I can just be. And honestly, this is maybe TMI, but I just love when you have a group of women who can talk about using the bathroom
Yep.
openly, and like stomach problems.
Yes.
And it's like,
Yes.
thank you. Thank you. We can talk about this stuff and no one feels ashamed. No one, nothing.
There's not a second thought. In fact, people will chime in and go, oh, yeah, now that you said that, let me tell you about my.
Yeah. Or how about, did you have this gel? What did that gel do to your stomach? Do you remember that? And I'm like, it's again, it's like this freedom to be a human,
Yes.
not just a woman. Right.
Yep.
And that's something that definitely does not show up in a lot of arenas. So y'all cultivate it, find it. I guarantee you there are women out there that are seeking this relationship with you. So
Yes.
just keep showing up. Final question. There is no right or wrong answer to this. How can we make running more accessible and inclusive?
Oh my goodness. So I'm working with a local run store on trying to do just this. And I think it involves, number one, people sharing their journeys, people sharing their experiences, that whatever pace, whatever size, whatever color, whatever gender, whatever SES, all of that, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Just get together. Just form a group. Let's just go and meet. It's that community. And I think that for so long, there was this perception that was amplified through the media of what running should look like or what a runner should be. And I pray that through things like social media and people sharing this is who I am. I'm not stick thin. I'm not 85 pounds. I'm not running a 106 or whatever Emily Sisson just ran in Houston. Like, that's amazing. And that's so awesome that she did that. But the person that's going to run a 306 half is just as welcome as she is. And I think that it's all about throw all those ideas of what you have to be or should be, and just show up, just come to the event, come to the thing. And by having these types of run clubs and community events that openly say this and encourage it and welcome people, and having the runners that are at those events, if you're experienced in running and you have friends there, to me, that's your responsibility then, is to go find those newer faces and welcome them. Go introduce yourself. Hi, I'm Melissa. What are you here for? What are you running? What are you doing? Because that's going to bring them back. If they show up and no one is welcoming and they kind of don't see anybody their pace or anything like that, like you said, seeing that reflection of yourself, they're not going to come back. Yep. So if we want to make it more inclusive, we have to be that inclusion. We have to live it, breathe it, and make it a priority. So, one of the things that I hear from some of my athletes and even just people that I connect with on Instagram is, there's no run club in my area. And I always say, well, why don't you create one? Like, it doesn't have to necessarily be anything official, but if you create that community, all paces, all distances, all whatever are welcome, I guarantee you people are going to show up and it's going to grow. And it's all about that. Okay, well, it doesn't matter if we're all out here running quote unquote fast or slow or far or long or whatever. It doesn't matter. It's all about that connection and community. That's my perspective, at least.
Yeah, that is one that I wholeheartedly agree with. And I've said it, where it's us people who are already in the community, we are the biggest ambassadors for the sport and the advocates for it. Mm-hmm. So it has to come from the inside out, right? Mm-hmm. So I really do love what you said of like, and the word I came up with, or how I described it in an earlier discussion, whereas for those of us who are already in the community, it's okay to sacrifice a run if it means you're that person that says, hi, I'm so and so. Do you mind if I join you today? How about we
Yep.
do this workout together? And like that's also part of it, right? Because and I've had people tell me the same thing where they'll say, oh, the run club says all paces welcome. But then when I go, there's no one to be with me. Everyone's
Mm-hmm.
too fast and they left me. And I mean, that was my experience too with something that I went to, that it was like all paces welcome. And I went and I was the slowest one. And, thankfully in my case, I was used to running alone. So I didn't feel it in the same way, but it was just one of those things where it's like, all right, so instead of saying all paces welcome, let's be really clear that you have to be at least this fast in order to join this group. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Be open about it. But I think it does, we do have to create, again, people within the opposite of that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you don't have a running community, you don't have a running club. Okay, yeah, exactly. Start one, but also maybe why don't you start a walking club? And like
Yeah.
that's a great way to get people in too. So I love all of that because it's this reminder that those of us who are already in the sport, and I don't want to make it sound so serious, but it's like we do have a duty to represent ourselves, like you said, share your journey to show that we're doing these things.
Mm-hmm.
Like there
Yep.
is power every time you post a picture, and one, I see a picture and I'm like, okay, she went out and she did it. And then when you post a picture with your friends, I'm like, okay, so now she did it with friends. So I can do that too. It's seeing that it's possible,
Yep.
that it exists. And then, yeah, that reflection point for myself of, if I see that and I like that and I want that, what can I do to recreate that for myself? Again, as someone who's in this community, it's like, all right, like we can do that too. So
Mm-hmm.
I love that because it's you said, I wrote, it was like exclamation mark, because you said it, it's like we have to be the inclusion. Like it's
Yes.
us. It is 100% us. And y'all, like, get to it. If you don't have a community in your community or a club in your community, create it. I can 100% guarantee that there is someone out there that would love to be your walking partner, running partner, and they're just too nervous, too shy. They think they're
Yep.
too slow, because that's
Yep.
often what it is. I'm too slow. I don't want to slow you down. And it's like, don't worry about me. Like, don't die. I'm okay with slowing down if it means I get to spend time with someone, get to
Yep.
know someone, and have great conversation. It's totally fine. So I love that. Final question is just tell us where we can connect with you. And if you have anything exciting coming up that we can cheer you on, celebrate you for, and really just show you some more love.
Oh, you're so sweet. Well, connection wise, I'm primarily on Instagram. That's my happy space on social media. My handle, it's actually pronounced ISA marathoner, but it reads is a marathoner. I answer to both, but it's so funny if I ever say it out loud and people will go, oh, I thought it was Isa. I'm like, yeah, it either work. But I'm on there for the most part. And then as far as next things coming up, I've got Boston in April. So I think it's like 12 weeks. So we're getting into the thick of the training and all of the hill training and all of that good stuff. So that'll be my next big thing. I've got a half before that in March, but I'm not quite sure yet if I'm going to race that or just use it as a training run, because Florida weather can be a little
Unpredictable.
temperamental.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for chatting with me today and for sharing all your wonderful insights and your thoughts on running, the power of friendships and running. And I I honestly just love having these conversations, and I love connecting to women like you. So I'm so incredibly grateful that you took the time to be on the podcast and speak to me. Any final words?
I just want to say thank you. I think it's great that you're putting this out there and amplifying these messages to new runners, experienced runners, to other coaches. I think it's great. And I hope that, again, the community and the connection comes across. So thank you for your time and everything that you do for our community as well.
Awesome. Thank you. All right, everyone. We'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.